That's right, Moby Dick. Hello there. I'm Dr. Neptune, and I'm going to talk today about a peculiarity that comes when you're a collector of a bunch of stuff, like media, which is that you end up with multiple versions of a lot of things. And I have a collection of several hundred books, mostly literature, and I only found 2 examples of books that I have in my current possession 2 versions of. Otherwise, I have 1 of each. Books are really hard to collect. They're a pain in the butt, quite frankly. They're fat and take up a huge amount of space, and they get all dusty and stuff, and they're just inconvenient forms of media. Nevertheless, I have held on to many books. I keep my book purchasing to a minimum these days. If I buy a book, if I really need to have it, I'll buy it on a Kindle. And mostly I buy art books now. But this is a version of an art book, I think, and this is Moby Dick. I put it in the top 5 novels of all time. I've read this at least maybe 5 times. I'm due for a rereading. I will soon. I have 2 versions of Moby Dick. One reason I don't have a lot of different versions of books is I've never found books themselves to be interesting as objects. I find the content of the books interesting. So I have a lot of books where they're all beat up and I've had since high school or college days, but I don't mind. First of all, because it's kind of nostalgic, but second of all, because it's as good as any other version of the book. So, for example, I have these 2 copies of Homer, or these 2 Homers, from a course I took in Greek Lit in probably 1986, and I've reread these epics several times. Don't mind that the binding's all cracked. At least the pages are still holding, and I don't really need a fancy version of this or of most of the other great books that I have in my literature collection. But once in a while something comes along that catches my eye. And so this is a version of Moby Dick that I bought at the SUNY Buffalo Library in probably 1985 or 86. A couple years after this paperback edition was published. I had read Moby Dick before, loved it, and I like the design of this cover right away. This is a cheap paperback version of a very elaborate edition that was published. The information is here in 1979 as a hardcover, 65 copies only. The original price was $1,000, which back in those days was just an astronomical sum for a book. It was printed on large-scale folio pages. 15 by 10 inches here, it says. Hand set, okay, so the typeface here, hand set, old school style, gives it a certain look, and filled with these great woodcuts. These are not from Moby Dick's time. These are modern. This is a modern artist, Barry Moser, who created these images, and they're all imagery related to the whaling industry, different places in the book, etc. No pictures of characters. That's kind of a generic picture of these guys working the bilge pump. But it really a great look to this with the typeface and the woodcuts. Helps to fill the role of the world of the book. There's a lot of chapters in Moby Dick that are essentially non-narrative in terms of the main plot, although there are several plots going on in Moby Dick, but there's a lot of technical chapters about the whaling industry and so forth. And there have actually been editions of this book. Here's a second one that I'm paging through. That's Captain Ahab. But there have been versions of this, editions of this published minus the chapters on, the process for harpooning a whale and skinning it and all these other things. That's a horrific thing to contemplate. The whaling chapters provide a background, a very realistic background to the really incredible events that happen in this story. Although the story itself is based on a true story, but very much embellished by the great Melville. So this second edition here that I just paged through is a Barnes & Noble edition that I got probably 10 years ago, maybe 15, at a college bookstore, and it just happened to catch my eye, again with the woodcut here. These are modern woodcuts and those inside pictures like I showed you. This is a Barnes & Noble edition, and this only cost $5. So I said, why not? I mean, that's half the price of the original paperback from the 80s, which was $9.95. So anyway, because of its importance to me as a work of literature, because I love it so much, I have these two finely illustrated versions of Moby Dick. And then the only other example I have of two versions of a book is this. It's John Dos Passos trilogy, called, in its entirety, it's called USA, comprised of 3 separate novels. Okay, 42nd Parallel, 1919, and The Big Money. Covers about the first 30-ish years of the 20th century. And Dos Passos is an incredible writer. Love him, a friend of Hemingway's, contemporary, obviously. I decided to reread these, and I really always thought that, although I do really like these covers of the old paperbacks that I own, that's why I'm still keeping them, really. I think they really look good, these covers. But I really felt like USA was a monumental work, similar to Moby Dick, in my estimation. And it deserved an upgrade. So a year or so ago, I got this. This is the same 3 books collected in the Modern Library, or Library of America edition. And the bookmark here, I've already reread the first 2. And so The Big Money's coming up, about the stock market boom and bust in the 20s. But that's it. I don't have any other dual or multiple copies of any books. But music, yeah. And that's what the rest of this talk is going to be about. Due to several different reasons, I think, which I'll explore when I talk through this. I have multiple versions of a lot of my music. One reason is just the changing formats. My collecting life has spanned from LPs through cassettes to CDs to now streaming, downloads, pretty much anything except 8-tracks. I have been looking for an 8-track just to kind of fill out my collection, but no luck so far. Anyway, I'll give you an example of why I still hold on to 2 versions of the same thing, because in a lot of cases, for example, of CDs that I bought back in the 80s and 90s, 20 years on, they were remastered, reissued, and sound a whole lot better. And so 20 years from the 80s or 90s is still a little bit before streaming started. So I needed to have it on CD. So in a lot of cases, I upgraded and then I just threw out the old version. Had no reason to keep both. But here's an example of why I would want to keep both. Here's Joy Division's first album, Unknown Pleasures. Here's the original CD that I had of it. And then here is special edition. You see the reverse color on the cover there. And it's purely as a collector object that I have this. I don't play albums really at all. But I just love that this celebrates this fantastic, amazing Joy Division album. And I love the red color. Right, so I hold on to both as artifacts, this because of its aesthetic value, and this, I guess, because of its nostalgic value, although I've always loved Joy Division in particular, their imagery. This is a radio spectrograph, or whatever you call these things, of a supernova. All right, so I have two versions of that, as well as two versions of this, which is Joy Division's last release. Still, here again is the original CD that I bought when it became available. And here is the original album from when it came out in 1980, maybe? Ish. Recorded in 1980s. So this was the last concert that Ian Curtis, lead singer of Joy Division, performed at. I believe it. Maybe in March he committed suicide. Joy Division then went on, reformed as New Order. But this is Still, which is a collection of outtakes and double album set. This is due to age. Okay, so inside here you can see the original gray coloring, very kind of tasteful, although some at the time and still see it as morbid, kind of like a funeral card or something. But here's some of their best known songs are here, like Dead Souls and Glass. Sister Ray is a Velvet Underground cover, and then this is the complete concert from that February of 1981 in Birmingham. Very simple, I would say elegant packaging. It's a shame about the aging, but again, you can see the color there, and it's very thick paper. And then here's the LP. So I keep this again as an artifact. I don't know why I don't have the album of Unknown Pleasure, or no, of Closer, sorry, rather, their second album after Unknown Pleasures, but I don't. Okay, so here's two versions of Joy Division. Here's another example of the same kind of thing. Here's Violator by Depeche Mode. I think this is probably the oldest CD that I still own. You can see it all cracked up. All of the rest of them I either sold over the years or eventually just threw out because they're junk. The last time I tried to sell CDs, they gave me about 10 cents each, which wasn't worth the gas to go there. But this album, as you see, came out in 1990. Has these classic Depeche Mode songs on it. Always have loved it, and so this disc has been played many times, and I keep it as a nostalgia item. And then here, this I got, I think I got this when I bought a turntable. I bought the turntable only because there were some things that I think I only have on LP or picture discs or something, but this was kind of my test to see if turntable on my sound system actually did sound better than digital music, CD or streaming, as so many claim. And I found it to be worse. Maybe it's just my ears have become accustomed to digital music, although I believe this album was actually recorded digitally, but this is an analog playback device, technically. Still, I'm glad that I have this because this is one of the best albums by one of the best bands ever. I believe I really should have checked on this, but yes, not just, well, we have a but there, but right on the right is second from left here, Andrew Fletcher. He just died several months ago, founding member of the group, and he's there next to Dave. But nevertheless, this is another one of those albums that I have two versions of, mainly out of nostalgia's sake. I still listen to all this music, but streaming. For Roxy Music, one of my favorite all-time bands, I have this is a reissue. This just occurred to me, this is the second time I've owned an LP of this album called Stranded. It's their third album from 1973. And I own it on CD right here. And then when it came out as a special edition LP, just like the Depeche Mode one, even though I wouldn't play it, I decided to get it. Comes with this fold-out poster of the amazing cover. Roxy Music was well known for having provocative covers. Models like this in various stages of undress. And when I had this album in my bedroom as a teenager, if it happened to be showing the cover, my mother would turn it around when she made my bed. No other conversation, but just I would go up and I would find, instead of this, I would find that, the legs, which I would imagine is pretty provocative too. Anyway, Roxy Music Stranded, containing Mother of Pearl. 2 of those. And then Manifesto, here's the CD of from 1979. This was the kind of first comeback of Roxy Music. Here's the picture disc of the same album, Manifesto. So yeah, the difference is the mannequins here have clothes on, here in the picture disc they don't. Of course, picture disc collecting is entirely different, I think, from collecting a regular vinyl LP, in that I don't think it's ever really meant to be played, although it could be. You can see the grooves right there. But I have a whole interest in picture discs too. It's my only Roxy Music one. And then here, just recently, I picked this up. This is a reissue of their 1980 album, Flesh and Blood. Another beautifully classic new wave album. You can hear all kinds of other bands in these songs that were influenced by them. I mean, Duran Duran especially, but also the Cars and many others. It's a beautiful album. I've always loved the cover too. It's got this classic, they almost look like Greek athletes or something, Olympians, I don't know. But here, the lyrics, and then another red vinyl album. I like the look of that. And so that duplicates this original CD that I had of theirs. So some artists or some albums I have more than one of, just for these nostalgic or other reasons to give tribute in my own way to them. Which then brings us to new releases. And so, when I started getting interested in K-pop, I recognized right away that they're geared towards the collector's market. I have too many what do I call them? Double versions, I guess, of releases to even show any of them. It's very common for there to be 2 different versions of the same album, with different packaging and other things inside. So I'll start with, this is the first time that I ever got 3 versions of the same album. And this is GFriend's, it turns out, their final album from November of 2020, and it's called Walpurgis Night. Even if there were more than 2 versions available at this time that this album came out, I thought 3 would be extravagant. So I hadn't bought any until this day, when I asked the guy at the K-pop store where the new GFriend album is, and he came out from the back after a few minutes, and he said, he held them towards me like this and said, "Okay, which one do you want?" And I felt a little bad, so I said, "I'll take all 3." And I'm glad I did. This is a classic album. Really, this is, like I said, GFriend's last album. Interesting to me that they call it Walpurgis Night, Northern European, myth or holiday tradition, cool imagery for each of the 3 versions, and a great album. The title song, the single from it, was Mago, straight out of 70s disco, and a full album here, as you see. Okay, so that was my first purchase of 3 versions of the same album. But that still doesn't match the 5 versions that I have of this classic Frankie Goes to Hollywood album. Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. Now, there may be an asterisk for those keeping strict statistics here because the track list of these albums are not exactly the same. This is the original release from 1984, but it's the Canadian version. And this is different from both the US version of the time and this updated, reissued version that I got some years ago. So just to compare the track list, you can see Relax Two Tribes, and then Ferry Across the Mersey is that one. It's not on the Canadian one. Happy High is on the Canadian one, not on the US one. San Jose is on US, not Canada. However, I still consider them the same release. So, 1, 2 CD versions, old and newish. This is also from Canada. This is a cassette version of not only Welcome to the Pleasure Dome, but there's cassette single versions of Two Tribes and Relax, called a Pleasure Pack, which if I'm not mistaken, Molson, the beer company, called their mixture of beers. But here are the items in question, and there's the cassette of Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. Then I have the LP. This is from the original time. Here's another one that I've kept all these years, despite the stains. For nostalgia reasons. Love Frankie. Made a whole video about them some time ago. So everything about this I love. And then this was, I believe, the first picture disc that I ever bought. So horrible what happened to this thing. It's just age. I didn't do anything. I didn't do this. But it's supposed to be see-through. It's supposed to be clear vinyl, same as the plastic that it's in, but it's browned with age. The colored parts remain vibrant. Okay, so it's the double LP of Welcome to the Pleasure Dome, but the brown parts look, quite frankly, like shit. And as far as I know, there's no way to bring it back to life, but I still keep it. So, 5 versions of Frankie. And here, 5 versions of Lana Del Rey's album Chemtrails Over the Country Club from 2021. Special edition cassette. CD box set version. Picture disc. Alternate version picture disc. And this is a double? No, single LP. Cream colored vinyl. One of Lana's masterpieces, part of her extraordinarily prolific last few years. Put out, I think, 3 albums in the last 2 years, plus a book and some other stuff. So, 5 versions of Chemtrails. And here, 5 versions of Blackpink's album called The Album. Maybe a little asterisk here for this part of the discussion. So these are the Japanese versions of The Album. I have 5 because this is one of 3 versions that came like this, but then they also had individual versions, covers for each member. So Lisa, Rosie, Jisoo, and Jenny. Okay, so Japanese lyrics all the way through. Same songs as on the official or Korean release. This is why I just mentioned asterisk, because quite frankly, I'm not sure whether to classify these Japanese albums as the same release as the Korean ones. If so, I have 8 copies of this total. If not, I have 5 tying with Frankie and Lana. Japanese stuff is always way more expensive than Korean stuff. Each of these albums cost $80, and then this one cost $120. So let's see, 4 times 80, 320 plus 120, 440, just on the Japanese versions alone. That's what Blackpink does to you, and they're coming out with a new one soon, so probably gonna spend just as much, if not more, but well worth it in my view. Now the 3 Korean versions of the album are shown here. This is one of the CD versions. Comes in this little box with the changing album cover, which is very, very cool, very well made. And that's supersized. On this ginormous release, same kind of cover. This is the LP version, loaded with books and all kinds of extras. I'm going to show this in more detail when I do my Blackpink video after they release their album, which is going to be called Born Pink. So stay tuned. And here's version number 3. That fancy deluxe LP version I just showed in the box is absolutely great. I love it. Well worth the $100 that it cost. But I would take 1 point off and give it a 99 because the actual LP of the album is black. It's just black vinyl. Yeah, black is half their name, but don't you think it should be pink? I do. Well, again, Canada to the rescue. To the rescue. This is the Canadian version, or a Canadian version of the album, and yes, absolutely pink. So, 8 versions of the album, 5 Japanese, 3 Korean, and that I guess tied for the record or exceeded it, depending on the accounting system used, until recently. First, though, before I get to what happened recently, I'm going to step away from the table and move over to the display area because there are just too many CDs on here to pull off and show to you for the next point that I'm going to make. So if 5 or 8 is the record for most versions of a single release, I will say that there's another way to keep track of all this, which would be number of releases by a single group. And Luna by far kills that record. So this is my Luna shelf. I've got Eve on display here, but here's all the Luna releases in order to present time, including their latest one this summer called Flip That. The releases are numbered. It's escaping me here, but there's over 30 separate releases, and so I have all of their solo releases, some of them in duplicate form, and then when we got to their group releases, I have a couple of, well, things are falling. I had a couple of duplicates, and then here the And album is the only one that I have all 4. Generally they release 4 versions of each group CD. So I have that there. The last count was around 35, I think, for these. And here's some of my other memorabilia that I just messed up. Some keychains and grip tocks. But Luna definitely has the group record for number of most CDs, I guess. Most number. Largest number. And as I step over this way, this is my Red Velvet shelf. I'll talk about them sometime when I'm ready. But for Red Velvet, I went through the numbers. And here, some of them are a little hidden by others. I rotate these displays just if I'm interested in looking at something different than what has been up there the last couple of weeks. I do that, so I'll just take some of that down. You can see the rest of it there. And then there's one or two large format things that don't fit on that shelf. But for Red Velvet, I've got 24 total CDs. These are my notes. 24 releases by Red Velvet with multiple versions of them in my collection. So, for example, we'll show right from the start 2 versions of Ice Cream Cake here. This is their Reeve Festival, parts 1, 2, and 3. So for each one I have the regular and special editions. These 2 editions, both editions, actually 2 and then 3, of their latest release called Feel My Rhythm. 2 versions of Irene and Sulgi's Monster, 1, 2, 3 of Joy's. These are Wendy's. I'll talk about all this in more detail, but I wanted to show anyway that I have many, many Red Velvet releases and many in duplicate form. And then recently I've noticed that there's been a trend where there'll be a normal release of a CD, and then there'll be individual versions of that same release for each group member. So, for example, this is Viviz. This is actually half of G-Friend. Went on to perform as Viviz. So there's 3 members in Viviz, and I got the regular version here. Actually, I think this is one of 2. And then there was one of this kind of release for each of the 3 members on the cover, and then inside there's more pictures. So here's Shinbi here, her version. And I had been, my general procedure as a collector would be to get the regular release, and then one member, if there was a setup like this, one of the members, kind of to represent the whole group. I wasn't going to have every member of every group, or I'd be broker than I already am. Here's another example, the group Ua. Ua, that's how you say that. You'd say it in just about every song. 5 members in this group. Here's their leader, Nana. So her version of this. So these are their latest release called Joy. Likewise, here's Ive, their latest one called Love Dive. So I've got the Wan Young version of that, her out of 6 members. And then here's Ro Jisen, one of the 9 members of From Us 9. They had 9 versions of this. Although now it's going to be From Us 8 because Jangiri has left to pursue her acting career. So it's going to be From Us 8. But anyway, Jisen is the ASMR video maker who kind of inspired me to start my own YouTube channel in the first place. So of course I had to get her version of their latest release from our Memento box. And I think when I was talking about Ive a couple months ago, I think I showed this and I said, well, if you were crazy as a collector, you would get all 6, for example, right? So you would have to have every member represented. So here's the whole group. There's Wan Young in the middle, but they had versions for all of the others too. So I said at the time, you'd have to be kind of a nut to do that. Pause for the ironic cut. So the new record holder in my collection for most number of copies of the same release is 13. These are the 13 versions of the latest WJSN, aka Cosmic Girls release called Sequence. There are 3 group versions, which I'll show first. There's 10 members of this group. 13 if you count the Chinese members. 3 Chinese members who've been sort of on hiatus for the last couple years. They're not currently performing with the group. But I want to show the first 5 members are in this version of the book here. All right, there's the leader and rapper Exi. There's Subin. There is Siola, Dawan, and Dayang. And then the other 5 members have this photo book. So Yeonjung, Luda, Bana, Yoram, and Unseo. So 5 and 5 there. But if you want the whole group all together, you got to get the blue one. Here's all 10. And these are the outfits that are also in the individual CDs that we have here. So, why WJSN? Why is this the one I decided to pull the ripcord on and get all of them? I don't know. I love the pictures. I love the group. Don't know that much about this group as compared to some others. Have other releases by them, but I'm not going to show them. But this is their latest one. They won first place in a show called Queendom 2, which I watched in the spring of this year and loved. But I really just like the concept. If I were to open each one of these, you'd see more pictures of each individual member. All right, but so Yoram and Exi and Dayang and Bana, Yeonjung and Luda, Unseo, Dawan, Subin, and Siola. There's only 4 songs on these CDs too. Not really cost effective, I guess, but that's not the point of collecting. So Last Sequence is the single. Done is another single, kind of secondary single, B-side. Aura, only available on CD. Good thing I have 13 of them. Stronger is a duet with Yeonjung and Dawan. So I will close on that image, or I guess of this image, as I wrap things up here. It's fun to collect stuff. Hope that's a theme that's come through of all my discussions here. But it occurred to me that maybe I should talk a little bit about numbers and what I have the most of, and duplicates and things like that. So here are here's the record holders. I just misplaced those other 3 versions, but here they all are, WJSN. Okay, hope you enjoyed that walk through my collection, and I will be back soon.